Hello friends! Today we are gonna explore a free visual IDE built for React, and we will create this movie application using it. As React developers, we all build our applications using only code-based IDEs, like VS Code. I love working with VS Code. I love its simple design, its shortcuts, extensions, and I can't imagine using another IDE for my JavaScript projects. But I just need another application to help me with the design, because using only code to design an application can be really difficult. Applying the CSS, going to the browser to check if everything is okay, coming back to add another div to fix the style, it takes a lot of time. And here is where we need Codex. Codex is a visual IDE that helps us to build and edit React components. It's just like a design tool similar to Figma, but you are not only designing the application, you are actually creating your React components in the background using TypeScript and CSS. So everything you create in Codex is reflected in your current React project. And the same thing goes for VS Code. Whatever you change here will be in Codex immediately. So what I'm trying to say is, Codex is not replacing your IDE. You can still write here your functions, React hooks, but when it comes to creating components, giving styles, basically for everything related to design, using Codex is a better solution. Right now I'm gonna create this movie application with Codex, and you will see how easy to use it. In this application, we will fetch movies using a free API, we can sort them, find by genre, we can add them to the favorites list, or remove, and we can search for any movie. As you realize, it's not just a simple design. We will be using here React hooks, context API, data fetching. Basically, you will learn how to use Codex and VS Code together. So if you are ready, go to the Codex website and download it for free. And after the installation, let's create a new project. I will give it a name. I will say movie. I'm gonna save this on my desktop, and you can choose here any template. You can use create React app, with or stylable. Let's choose any of them. And let's install our project. And it's ready. As soon as you do that, you are gonna see your React project here. If you want to, you can open it using VS Code. Like that, as you can see, our folders and files are here. And also, you can open your folders using Codex. I will click here. As you can see, our folders and files. And this is the main.js file. If I delete anything here, as you can see, it's not here anymore. And also, I can delete from VS Code, and it's gonna be reflected on Codex. Let me make this bigger. Okay. And also, instead of code, we can choose here our components. We have only one component here. Let's choose it. And this is how it looks. If I click here, I can see all my HTML elements. As you can see, we have only header, but we don't need that. Let's delete. And let's decide what we are gonna do. Let me make this smaller actually. Okay, it's better. And what I want to do is to create two main components. The first one will be our menu. And in the middle, we are going to create a container. And for the right side, we are going to create the favorite section. Let's create those components. I will come here. I will say new component. And the first one will be menu. Let's create others. I will say container. And one more. Favorite. So we have three more components. I can use them in my app.js. I will come here and choose a local component. By the way, as you can see, you can add here an HTML element, but we are going to add our components. First one will be the menu. I will drag and drop here. And the other ones, container, and favorite. Like that. Let's open up our code. As you can see, our components are here. Perfect. So what I want to do is to give a background color for my main div. To do that, I'm gonna choose styles. And here, as you can see, we have everything we need. Layout section, positioning, we can give any margin or padding, its size, font options, borders, backgrounds, and effects. Let's give a background. You can choose any color here, or you can paste here your own color, like that. Let's give a width and height. I will say 100 VW, so it's gonna contain all our screen. And we don't have to give height for now. It can stay like that. And if I say font color, we can see our components better. Like that. As you can see, they are here. And what I want to do is to make them horizontal. To do that, we can use display flags. As you can see, we have our options here. I'm gonna choose flags. They are horizontal. And since we are using display flags, we can use flags property. For the menu and favorite section, we can give flags 1. And for the container, we can give flags 5. So it will be 5 times bigger than menu and favorite. Let's do that. I'm gonna open up menu here. And this is the menu div. And I'm gonna come here and say flags grow and shrink. I will do the same thing for favorite. I'm gonna come back. Of course, you can do the same thing using the single component like this, but I want to see how my components look like, so it's better to do this in the app component. Let's open up favorite. It's gonna be 1, and for the container, it's gonna be 5. Okay, perfect. We can see right now how our components look like. Let's take care of our menu. I'm gonna come here, and as you can see, we have only text here. Let's open up our component. I'm gonna delete this menu and choose my root div and give a style. I'm gonna choose a background color. It's gonna be a little bit lighter, like that. Of course, we don't have any element. Let's create. I will say add, and I'm gonna choose a div block, and it's gonna be the logo container. And inside this container, we are gonna have an image and a text. Let's do that. I will say image and a text. Let's say span, like that. Let's give a text. So I'm gonna come here, and as you can see, we have only one property, and it's our text. I'm gonna change here. It's gonna be Llama movie. Of course, we cannot see it. We don't have any color. Let's choose our main div and change the font color. You can search for it, or if you want to, you can write it here. I will say color. As you can see, text color. And I will say white. And all texts in this div will be white right now. Okay, let's give a source for this image. I'm gonna search for property, and it's gonna be its source. And I'm gonna paste my URL. Or if you are using your public folder, you can write it directly here, like image folder, logo PNG, but I'm gonna use this URL. And let's give a style. I'm gonna open my logo div and choose styles. We cannot apply any style, that's because we don't have any class name yet. Let's create. I will say logo. I will create this class, and right now I can apply. And the first thing will be its height. I will say 50 pixels. I will say display flags. Align item center, and of course this image is too big. Let's come here and give a style. I'm gonna create a class. Let's say logo image. Let's give a width and height. It's gonna be 50. And what about this text? I can increase its font size. Let's come here, give a class name. I will say font size 24. And I'm gonna change its color. It's gonna be a red color. Let's paste here our code, and that's all. By the way, for the main div, we can give any padding. Let's come here and say 50. As you can see, it looks much better. And let's create other elements here. I can close this logo, and I'm gonna create another span. Oops, it's gonna be outside of this div, like that. Let's give a name. I'll say title. Let's change this color. It's gonna be gray, like that. And let's change this text, by the way. And it's gonna be sort by. And after this span, I'm gonna add a line here. Let's say HR tag. Let's change its color. It's gonna be gray. To do that, I'm gonna choose styles, apply a class, let's say HR, And firstly, I'm gonna remove its height. Instead, I'm gonna give a border, let's say 0.5 pixels, and its color will be gray, like this. By the way, I can separate my items. They are too close each other. I'm gonna choose my root div, and I will say display flags, but this time it's gonna be vertical, and I can give any gap between them, and let's say 20 pixels. I'm gonna give width for this HR tag, and it's gonna be 100%. Okay, let's create a list here. I'm gonna choose UL. Let's move it here, and inside this list, let's create our list items. I'm gonna say list item, like that. Let's give a class name for them, list, and list item. And for the text inside, let's say popularity. And we are gonna add 2 more list items, but instead of writing them like that, let's open up our VS Code and find here our menu. And I want to show you how you can map through your items. I will say const sort by, it's gonna be a list, and I will say popularity, most voted, and release date. So I can use this item. By the way, we are using TypeScript, so you can indicate here its type. It's gonna be a string array. Let's use it here. I'll say sort by map, and for each item inside, we are gonna call this list item. Of course, if you are using map, you should use a unique key. I will just say item. I'm gonna change this name. It's gonna be item. And as you can see, our items are here. This is how you should use Codex with VS Code. If you need any JavaScript functionality, just use your VS Code. Also, you can use the code here. If you don't want to change your IDE, you can directly write it here. Okay, let's take this back and let's give a style. Firstly, I'm just gonna get rid of this margin and padding. They are gonna be 0. And I'm gonna delete those dots. So I'm gonna search for list type. As you can see, list style type, and it's gonna be none. And I can separate them using Flagsbox. I'm gonna come here and choose flags, vertical, and gap between them. Let's say 20. It's that easy. And I'm gonna do the same thing for genre. So I can duplicate this title, move it here, this HR, and list. Like that. Let's close here. And let's change the title. It's gonna be genre, and my items here. And again, let's open up the code. I'm gonna create another array, and it's gonna be genre, and let's say action, comedy, horror. And of course, we are gonna change them when we use our API, but for now, they can stay like that. And I'm gonna do the same thing for here. And instead of sort by, it's gonna be genre. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Right now, we can take care of the container. Let's open up. And I'm gonna delete this text. So I want to give padding for this container. Here, I'll say 50 pixels. Of course, we don't have anything inside. But when we create the search bar and our movie cards, you are gonna see better. So let's create those components. I will say search, and one more is gonna be cards. Basically, this component will contain all our movie cards. So we are gonna need one more component, and it's gonna be card. Okay, let's open up the container and move our components inside this div. I will say add local components. The first one will be the search bar. I'm gonna drag and drop. And I'm gonna add the second one, and it's gonna be cards, like that. Of course, it's gonna be under search bar, and inside this cards component, let's open up and delete this. I'm gonna add my card component, like that. Of course, we are gonna have multiple cards. We can do the same thing. We can create our data, but for now, we don't have any API. Let's duplicate this. Like that, 8 items. I can turn back to the container div. By the way, I can close others. Firstly, I'm gonna give style for this search component. Of course, inside this component, we are gonna create our input and button. Let's do that. I will say input. It's gonna be a text input and a button. Like that. Let's give class name for them. I will say input. I will give a width for this. It's gonna be 50%. I'm gonna change its background color because by default it's white. Let's make it transparent. Let's see how it looks. As you can see, there is a border here. Let's delete that. It's gonna be 0. I can give a padding inside. Let's say 10 pixels. And I'm gonna increase the font size. It's gonna be 18. So what about this button? I'm gonna give a style. Of course, it's a text. Let's change it. I'll say search. And I'm gonna choose my button and add here a new class. Let's say button. Firstly, let's change its background color. I'm gonna make it red, like that, and the text color will be white. Let's say white, and the font weight will be, let's say 500. It's gonna be a little bit thicker, and I'm gonna give some padding. By the way, we can delete this border. It's gonna be 0 pixel. And finally, I'm gonna give a padding. Let's say 15. Right now, I can separate my items using Flexbox. Let's choose the main container, and I will say display flex and justify content space between, like that. As you can see, our input is here and button is here. Let's see how it looks. And if I open up my app component, we can see better, as you can see. And of course, I can give any placeholder and I can give a border for my div. Let's open up. By the way, there's a typo here. Let's change. It's gonna be search. Okay. I'm gonna choose my container and I'm gonna give a border. Let's say 2 pixels and its color will be gray. Let's choose any color like that. And also I'm gonna give border radius. Using these corners, we can give any radius here. Let's say 15 pixels, like that. But as you realize, this button is overflowing. Like that. Let's give overflow hidden. I'm gonna write here overflow. I'm gonna choose hidden. And that's all. And for this input, remember, we are gonna give a placeholder. I'm gonna choose its properties here and find placeholder. And let's say search. Okay, let's see. And right now it's much better. I can give margin between this search and cards component. Let's choose this root div and I'm gonna search for margin and I'm gonna give only margin button. So I will come here and say unlock 35. Okay, let's see. Perfect. So let's take care of those cards. I can do it here. I'm gonna choose container, cards, and firstly it's gonna be display flex. Like that. And I will say justify content space between. So I can separate them. And I will say flex wrap is wrap. That because when we give any width for our cards, they are gonna be overflowing. If they don't fit on this line, we are gonna move them to other line. You are gonna understand better right now. So let's take care of our cards. I'm gonna open up card here. Let's delete this text. And firstly, I'm gonna give width and height. Let's say 250, 350. I'm gonna give a border radius, let's say 10 pixels. And for each item, I'm gonna give margin bottom. Remember how we are doing this. Unlock first and margin bottom will be 30 pixels. And in our application, we are gonna need a movie image. And when we hover over this card, we are gonna see the details of this movie, like its title, its rating, description. Let's add them. I will say image, like that. And I'm gonna add a div block. And it's gonna include our movie detail. Let's say h1 tag. It's gonna be movie title. I will say span. It's gonna be the rating. A p tag. It's gonna be the description. And one more is gonna be a button that we can add this movie into favorites. Okay, let's change them. Of course, you can give text for your elements and source for this image, but I want to show you how you can use props using codecs. I'm gonna open here. As you can see, we have card props and we can add here anything we want. What I want to add is a movie and it's gonna include an ID, let's say string. It's gonna have an image. In our API, the image is poster path. It's gonna be a string, but some of movies doesn't have any image. So I'm gonna add here a question mark and we are gonna have a title, overview. It's gonna be our description. Rating in our API, it's vote average. It's gonna be a number. and release date. Right now, I can use my image here. I will say source movie.image. Of course, I should add my movie here. We are gonna take it as a prop. And by the way, it's not image. What was the name? Like that. This h1 tag will be our title. This rating, overview, and that's all. But as you realize, there is an error here that because we don't have any prop, but to design our component, we need some props. To do that, I'm gonna come here, choose my component, and open up properties. As you can see, we can add any movie here. Let's add, let's say ID. A description, release date, let's say 2000, I don't know, avatar 7, and we can add here any image. I'm gonna copy and paste my source. And if you check here, as you can see, it's a board component. Basically, we can pass any props to our card to design our component. It's just for designing purpose, and it's one of the best features of Codex. So let's come here and give style for our elements. Firstly, for this image, let's give a class name quickly. It's gonna be 100%, 100%. And for these details, we are gonna be using position absolute, and it's gonna be on our card. I'm gonna give a class, let's say detail. I'm gonna choose here position absolute. Let's give position top 0, left 0. I'm gonna give width and height. It's gonna contain all our card. Let's say 100. And I'm gonna give a background color. Let's choose black here, but I want to give some gradient like that so we can see the image also. And for the texts, I'm gonna give text color is gonna be white like that. Let's give a style for these texts. For the span, for example, I will say rating. I'm gonna give font weight. It's gonna be 500. And for this p tag, it's gonna be 300. Let's say description is gonna be 300. And for this button, firstly, I'm gonna make this circle. So I'm gonna find corners, and I'm gonna say 50%. I'm gonna change this text. It's gonna be just a plus. Like this. And of course, it's not totally circle that because we didn't give any width and height. Let's give 40 and 40. Let's change its background color. It's gonna be red, and the text color will be white. Maybe let's increase this size. Okay, and there's a border here. Let's delete. It's gonna be 0. Okay. Of course, it looks a little bit strange right now. That's because our description is really short. Let's change it actually. I'm gonna open up my board and change my object like that. And right now, as you can see, it's really long. To prevent this, we can limit the character. Let's come here, open our code, and I will say substring, take the first 220 characters. Like that. Let's see right now. As you can see, it looks much better. So what I'm gonna do is giving opacity 0 for the detail, and when we hover over this detail, its opacity will be 1. Let's search for opacity. I will say 0 and add here a hover effect. Let's create. And in this case, its opacity will be 1. So let's try. I'm gonna close this. Let's see. I will preview. And perfect. And finally, let's take care of this favorite section. I'm gonna give our soft background color. Remember, we have used this for menu. I'm gonna come here and paste my background color like that. And the font color, the gray color. And I'm gonna give a padding, let's say 50 pixels. And let's make this flexbox vertical. And for each item, I'm gonna give 20 pixels gap. Let's add here a title. We don't need this text, by the way. I can delete. I will say h1 tag. And after this title, we are gonna add our favorite cards. To do that, we can create one more component here. And it's gonna be favorite card. It's gonna be similar to our card component, but we are gonna have only image, the movie title here, and maybe the release date or the average rating. And finally, when we hover over, we are gonna see a delete button here. Let's do that. Again, we are gonna take a movie as a prop. Let's open up here. I will paste my movie. Let's take it as a prop. And we are gonna use its image, title, and let's say this average number. Let's create our items. First one will be image. Let's delete this text. And I'm gonna create h1 tag. And one more is gonna be a span. Of course, it's gonna be outside. By the way, I can create a div for this h1 tag and span. That's because they are gonna be horizontal. Let's do that. I'm gonna create a div here. And move my title and span inside this div. Like that. And finally, I'm gonna create one more div. And it's gonna include our delete button. I will say image. And it's gonna be inside this div. Okay, so basically the h1 tag will be movie.title. Span will be the average number, and this image will be our movie image. Okay, let's turn back and create our board. I'm gonna open up this movie object. I'm gonna give ID, overview, release date, title, average, and the image. Let's give a style. Firstly, for this image, I will say favorite image. I'm just gonna give a width, and it's gonna be 100%. Like that. And for this container, remember it's here. Let's give a name. I will just say detail. It's gonna be flexbox, horizontal, and align item center. And I will say justify content space between. Of course, this text is too big. Let's give a class. I will give font size, and it's gonna be 20 pixels. And maybe increase this font weight, 500. And I can change those text colors. I can choose my root div, and for this color, I'm gonna choose any gray color here. Actually, let's say 777 for the consistency. And what about this delete button? By the way, we didn't give any source here. Let's give. I'm gonna paste it here. Okay, let's do the same thing. I'm gonna give position absolute for this div. Let's give a style. I'm gonna say delete. Its position will be absolute, top 0, left 0, and I can center this button. To do that, I can use display flex, align item center, and justify content center. Of course, we don't have any height and width. It's gonna be 100%. 100%. Okay, I said align item center, justify content space between, but there is something important here. If you are using position absolute, the parent div should be position relative. So I'm going to choose here and say position relative. And I will do the same thing for my cart. It's going to be position relative. And okay, it's still not centered. So let's give a background color. I'm going to choose the black color and I'm going to give gradient. Let's see what's wrong. Oh, I said space between. Of course, it's going to be center. And again, I will say opacity 0. And when I hover over, it's going to be 1. Let's add here a state, hover state. And when I hover over, it's going to be 1. Let's see. I will preview. And awesome. Right now, we can add our API. To do that, we are going to be using the MovieDB. It's a free API. After the login process, you can visit your settings page, and in the settings page, just click on API and you are going to see your API key here. So using this API key, we can make any API request and fetch movies. Let's see examples here. As you can see, there's a discover section here. And we can search movies with those queries. As you can see, there's a sort by and with genre. So we can use this endpoint. Discover and movie. Let's do that. Right now, instead of listing our cards like that, we can fetch our data, and for each movie in that data, we can call this card component. To do that, we are going to be using a use state hook. I will say const movies, set movies, use state. At the beginning, it's going to be an empty array. By the way, let's import this from React. And also we are going to be using useEffect to fetch our data. Let's use it. I will say useEffect. I will say fetch. I'm going to paste my URL here. I will say then I'm going to take the response and transform this into a JSON object. And then we can set our movies. I will take the data and set movies. It's going to be data.results. And if there's an error, I will say catch. Just console log this error. And using these movies, finally we can call our cart. I will say movies map. And for each movie, call this cart. And I'm going to add here a unique key. It's going to be movie.id. And I'm going to pass here the movie. And it's going to be the movie itself. By the way, I can create here a movie interface as we did before. And this use state will be this movie array. So let's delete others. By the way, there is something wrong. Okay, here we said ID is string, but it's going to be a number. Of course, for the board, let's get back. We said it's a string, but it's going to be a number. I will do the same thing for here. Okay, it's already a number. And let's change this endpoint, by the way. It's going to be discover. And we don't have any ID here. Later, we are going to add here our genre and sort by type. But for now, let's see. By the way, as you can see, our cards are here. Let's preview. We don't see any images, but we have their titles, description, and other detail. Let's check what's wrong. I will say console log movies. And as you can see, our movies are here. But if you check the poster path, you are going to see we don't have the image URL. Instead, it returns only the path. To see our images, we need to add here our URL. Let's do that. I'm going to open up cart. Let's see the code. So I'm going to delete here and I'm going to add my URL and after this path. Let's do the same thing for favorite cart. I will delete here like that. I'm going to shrink here and as you can see, our items are here. Perfect. Let's run our application and see on the browser. Okay, they are here, but there is something different. As you can see, all items are centered, all texts. It's because of our app div, I think. Let's see. I'm going to open up app. It's by default, as you can see, text align center is going to be start. Okay, perfect, but they are centered. Let's open up menu. And it's going to be start also. And let's start again. And perfect. By the way, we don't have our title here. Let's check. I'm going to open up favorites. There's an h1 tag here, but we didn't add anything there. Let's see. Okay, let's say favorites. And right now it's here. So how we are going to add a movie here? To do that, we are going to be using React Context API. Let's open up our files here. And inside source, I'm going to create one more folder and it's going to be context. Let's create our file, favorite context. And firstly, we are going to create our initial state. So I will say const initial state. And it's going to include favorite movies. Let's say favorites. It's going to be an array. Of course, let's create our interface. I'm going to create my movies. And let's create another interface. And it's going to be our state. And favorites will be movie array. Like that. And I can write my type here. It's going to be state. And I'm going to import here my React. Create context. And use reducer from React. Let's create our reducer. I'll say const favorite reducer. It's going to take our state. Its type will be state. And it's going to take an action. And using this action, we are gonna add and remove movies. Let's use here switch case. I will take the action type, and the first case will be add movie. In this case, we are gonna return a new state. I will say favorites. We are gonna take the previous value, and we are gonna add here action payload. By the way, if you don't know how to use context API, use reducer hook, just watch my use reducer video. It's gonna be on the card. After that, everything will be easier for you. And I'm gonna add here one more case. And if it's remove movie, we are gonna filter our array. So favorites will be state.favorites, but we are gonna filter it. And for each item inside, we are gonna check its ID. If it's not equal to payload ID, we can leave it. If IDs are equal, we are gonna remove that item from favorites array. By the way, we didn't add here any interface. Let's add interface, favorite action, type will be string, and the action payload will be movie. Basically, we are gonna send a movie as a user, and it's gonna take that movie and add it into favorites array. And same thing here, it's gonna take the movie and look at its ID, and if it's equal to this item ID, it's gonna remove that movie from favorites array. Let's write here favorite action, and right now we can create our context. I will say export const favorite context. It's gonna be create context, and we are gonna write here our state. It's gonna be initial state and dispatch, and it's gonna be an function. So let's write here our type. State type will be state, and dispatch will be react dispatch, and it's gonna take favorite action. So let's create our context provider, and after that we are gonna wrap our application with that provider, and finally we will be able to reach this initial state from everywhere in our application. So I will say export const favorite context provider. I will say children. Basically, it's going to be our application. We are going to wrap it. Let's create here another interface. I will say provider props, and children will be React Node. Basically, it can be any HTML element. So let's take this from provider props, and we are going to take this state and dispatch, and we are going to pass it to our children. Let's take them first. I will say const state dispatch. I will say use reducer hook, and I'm going to pass here my favorite reducer and also the initial state. By the way, there is something wrong. I forgot here returning default. If it's none of them, it's going to be the state itself. And here I forgot spreading. Okay. Finally, I'm going to return favorite context provider. And I'm going to pass here the children. And the value will be the state and dispatch. Okay, let's use this provider and wrap our application. I'm going to open up app.js, and I'm going to wrap my container and favorite section. We don't need to wrap our menu. We are not going to use favorite context API there. We are going to need only here. Like that. Let's import this and let's create our functionality. I'm going to open up the card component, and when I click on this plus button, I'm going to dispatch this action type, add movie, and I'm going to pass a payload, and it's going to be a movie, by the way. I forgot that. Okay, I'm going to turn back, and I'm going to call my favorite context first. To do that, we are going to be using use context hook, import use context from React, and I will say const use context, and I'm going to pass here favorite context. Let's call this also like that, and I'm going to call the dispatch function. And using this function, we can pass our movie. I will say on click event, dispatch. And remember, we have a type here. It's going to be add movie. And also we are going to pass the payload. And it's going to be the movie itself. So I'm going to copy this and paste for favorite card. Let's import them like that. And I will do the same thing here. When I click on this delete button, let's say on click, I'm going to call dispatch. Type will be remove movie. And the payload will be movie. Let's try. I'm going to run my application to see better. Let's click here. Okay, it's not working. That's because we didn't call here our favorite cards. So I'm going to paste my use context again and import them. But this time, instead of dispatch, I'm going to call this state. And after this title, I'm going to call my cards. I will say state.favorites. Actually, I can write here a condition. If its length is bigger than 0, it means we have movie inside. In this case, we can show them state.favorites.map, and for each movie inside, call favorite card. Let's import this here. And I'm gonna pass my movie. And also we need a unique key. It's gonna be movie ID. Okay, let's try. I will start. I'm gonna add, and it's here. If I click, it's gone. And what about movies? We can sort them. We can find by genre, or we can search for them. To do that, we are gonna need another context API, and we are gonna store our queries. Let's do that. I'm gonna stop. Let's open up files, and I'm gonna add one more context here. Let's change its name, and it's gonna be search context. Let's change those names. It's gonna be really similar. So I'm gonna just change names, and I'm gonna explain you later. Like that. And I'm gonna delete them. And we don't need this movie anymore. And the state will be sort by. It's gonna be a string. And two more. It's gonna be genre and the search query. And the search action type will be string. As a payload, we are gonna return a string. In any case, we are gonna return any string. And the initial state will be, let's copy here. And they are gonna be empty strings. Actually, by default, let's check our API. As you can see, we can sort by popularity. I can choose this, and by default, we can fetch popular items. Okay, so I will say sort by. In this case, we are going to update this sort by string. So I will say return, take the state, and the sort by will be action.payload. So I can do the same thing for others. I will say add genre. In this case, we are going to add a new genre here. And finally, add query. Okay, let's wrap our application. I'm going to open up here, but this time we are going to wrap our menu also, so I can use it here. Like that, and let's import. Okay, right now I'm going to open up cards, and I can add my queries here. In this case, we are going to need our search context. Let's add it here and import, and we are going to need use context. And using this state, we can reach any data. So I will say const, take the sort by genre and query from state and use it here. So I'm going to say sort by is going to be the sort by from our context API. By the way, they are going to be backtick because we are using JavaScript inside this string. And one more query, and it's going to be genres. But there is something important here. Let's check our API. As you can see, this string includes our genre IDs. So basically, it's not going to be action, comedy, or something like that. It's going to be some numbers. To do that, we can use those IDs and their texts. If you remember, in the menu component, let's check here. We have used those arrays, but I'm going to change here and I'm going to store genres like that. Their IDs and texts. In this case, I should change here. It's going to be ID string, text string, and it's going to be an array. And I can do the same thing for sort by, like that. It's query and text. Let's change here. It's going to be string, text will be string, and array. Okay, right now I should change them. So it's going to be item text, and the key will be item query or text, whatever you want. And again, item text, and the key will be, let's say, ID. So let's use dispatch function here. Let's import use context and our search context. And using this function, we can choose any genre here. So I will say on click method, dispatch, its type will be add genre, and the payload will be, remember, we are passing its ID. So I will say item.id. So I will do the same thing for sort by. I will paste. This time it's going to be sort by. And I'm going to pass here item query. Okay, actually let's close everything here. I will say close all. And let's start our application. Okay, it didn't change. That's because inside useEffect, we didn't add our variables here. I will say if sort by and genre change, just run this useEffect. Let's try. I will click. As you can see, it has changed. Comedy movies and release date. As you can see, some of them don't have any image. Most voted and perfect. So what about here? By the way, I should change this input. Its color is black and there's an outline here. I can delete that. And let's check our API. Unfortunately, we cannot search for any movie using Discover. Instead, we have to use this search endpoint. As you can see, we can add any query here. I wish they were together, but we have to use either a search or Discover endpoint. It's going to be a little bit strange, but we have to do this like that. So I'm going to create a condition here. Let's stop. And I will say, if query is not an empty string, search for a movie. If it's not, search for a genre or sort by. Here we are using search endpoint and our query. Right now I can add my dependency here. And it's going to be query. Let's handle our query using search input. I'm going to come here and open up search. And I want to change this input first. Let's search for outline. It's going to be none. And the font color is going to be gray. And there was something more here. I'm going to open up menu. And for those list items, I'm going to give cursor pointer. Like that. So we can click on them. Okay. So let's open up this search code. And I'm going to take the input text here. To do that, we can use statehook. I will say const input, set input. It's going to be use statehook. And at the beginning, it's going to be an empty string. And after that, we are going to call search context dispatch function. Let's paste here. And using this function, we can pass our query. But before, let's set our input here. I will say on change. Whenever it changes, it's going to update our state here. And it's going to be event target and value. By the way, I'm going to import search context, use state and use context. By the way, there is something wrong. On change, take the event, set input. Okay, I think there was a typo. And right now, using this input, we can dispatch our action. To do that, I'm going to add here on click event. And I'm gonna dispatch. Let's write type. It's gonna be add query. And the payload will be input. Okay, let's try. Let's write here any query. I will search. And as you can see, they are here. Perfect. By the way, we can round this float number and we can give a limit for this title. And there is one more thing here. If I click on any genre, as you can see, nothing is changing. That's because we still have a query here. And if you remember, let's stop this. In cards component, we said if there's a query, use this endpoint, and we always have a query there, even if we click on any genre. So I'm gonna open up search context, and I'm gonna write here, query will be empty string again, like that. So when I click on genre or sort by, we are gonna make the query empty string again. And let's open up card component. And again, I'm gonna take the substring. It's gonna be first 26 characters. And for this rating, I will say to fixed. It's gonna take only one number after the comma. Let's check. As you can see. Okay. By the way, I can give cursor pointer here. And I can give gap between each item here. Let's choose this button. And it's gonna be cursor pointer here. And for the cards component, let's give a gap here. I'll say 10. And perfect. So that's all, guys. You see how easy to create any component using Codex. It makes designing part really easier. And I'm using Codex for just 1 week. And I can say that the more you use it, you get faster. You are creating components faster. You are giving styles faster. You just need some practice. And I'm gonna continue using Codex in my projects because I really wonder what they are gonna do after beta. I'm so excited for the next version. And that's all. I hope you liked it. If you learned something new today, please like the video. And don't forget to follow Lama Dev's social media accounts. I hope I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.